Dr. Brian Peters, how are you doing today?
I am doing well. How about yourself?
Great, great, great. I always love these moments when we're on the Future of Engagement podcast. I can't tell you how much I enjoy doing these with you because where else can a guy find a guy to do a podcast with on engagement who literally is a doctor of engagement? I think we've mentioned this before, but for anyone who's coming to us for the first time, uh, Brian has received his doctorate in organizational industrial psychology, and his dissertation was on engagement. So he knows pretty much everything about engagement and what's fluffy and what's not fluffy, and how more organizations than not really aren't engaged, even if they've taken a rinky dink survey and they need help. And so that's why we're here, is to try and offer some tips on things that really work. Now, we've had some fun so far. We've talked about leadership styles versus leadership behavior, the importance of communication. Can people really change? And if so, how do you help them? And things like that. Today, we're going to talk about something that's pretty technical, and that is a key performance indicator or a metric that can be used to help people understand what it is that they are accountable for, what's expected of them to increase productivity or performance on the job, and how often people simply don't know what that is and the problems that that creates. And we're also going to be talking about why key performance indicators are so important to defining and executing and achieving a strategy. And I will say that oftentimes people say that they have a strategy, and then I'll talk to them uh, a little bit, and I'll find out that they actually don't. And before we get started, Brian, I'll just give you an example. A lot of times I go to people, I say, "Do you have a strategy?" And they say, "Well, of course you do." And after I've talked to them a little while, I find out not so much. And the reason is I'll say, well, you obviously have a mission and values and a vision statement. Of course we do. It's on a big board, you know, in the entranceway. And I'll say, well, have you ever gotten everyone together and do um, some scenarios or ask questions of them and ask them how they see themselves actually helping you to achieve that vision? No. Okay. So have you ever done a SWOT analysis of the strengths and weaknesses in your organization? Oh, sure. Everybody does that. Oh, really? Who did you present it to? Well, we presented it to the board. Oh, did you ever show it to, like the rank and file, like everybody works here? No. Oh, okay. All right then. Hey, well, does everybody here in every single role understand what their key performance indicators are or what their key areas of responsibility are? Do they know that like the back of their hand? Not sure. That's a good question, but I'm really not sure. Oh, okay. Hey, do you think that they know what the key performance indicators or the things that the people they're supporting are expected to do? Probably not. Okay. Well, it's sounding to me like there's not much of a strategy going on, and so we would, maybe we can ramp that up a little bit. That's sort of what I hear a lot of times when I start poking around. So that being said, you're an expert on key performance indicators and why they're so daggone important. So can you just take it away and talk about that? Like, what are KPIs and why are they so daggone important to creating an organization that adheres to a strategy, is successful, and is engaged? You can just talk for the rest of the half an hour about.
Yeah, so KPIs, key performance indicators, and Basically, it's just a number that everybody has. It's a metric that everybody has, at least one. Some roles may have more KPIs than that. Um, the There are people who will argue that roles can't have KPIs. It's too hard. And I was actually one of those people. Excuse me. I was one of those people for a little while with HR roles. And like, a lot of what we do is very intangible. So how do you really have KPIs around that? As I've grown in my career, I've realized that that was a silly belief that I had, but I was one of those people. Um, the value of KPIs, it's a objective measurement, which is nice, right? It's just a way that we can objectively measure somebody's performance. But it also, like, what I think it really does is it makes sure, hopefully, they are leading indicators, um, and it helps to make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, right? So we're trying to move this big behemoth ship of an organization. We all need to make sure that we are trying to do that in the same direction. How do you do that if you're not measuring certain things to make sure that what everybody's working on, the important things that they're working on, are contributing to the overall goals of the organization, which are tied to the vision of the organization, which is tied to the mission of the organization. So I think they're really important. It helps people understand their value within the organization. It helps people understand what is expected of them within an organization, and it helps make sure we're all moving in the same direction so that we can hit our strategic goals as an organization. When you don't have those things, people tend to make up make up their own either KPIs or priorities, right? Like what do they think is important, and that might actually be counter to what you really need within the organization. You really need every department working together towards your overall, again, vision, your overall goals, your strategic plan. So I think they're incredibly important. They're often overlooked. I did just get done with a project last year where we actually added KPIs to job descriptions, which I actually thought is not something I've had leaders ask me to do before, but I thought it was really an interesting exercise because that means every job description somebody is off on, they are made aware of their top 3 to 5 accountabilities and KPIs associated with those, which I think provides a lot of transparency and what's expected of that role and how they're going to be measured, like what success looks like.
Yeah, I think let's talk um, for a second about the specifics on what a KPI actually is and looks like. And I'll just, you know, give one story that maybe will make it simpler. I'm going to use a guy's name. I'm not sure if I should, but I just will. I mean, some people love him, some people hate him, some people have mixed uh, emotions. But let's consider Elon Musk just as a classic example of a KPI kind of a guy. Whether you love the guy or hate the guy, like I said, there's kind of a mixed reaction to him out there. But when he went into Twitter, famously or infamously, he walked in and he just walked up to people and said, "What do you do?" And a lot of them said, "Well, it's kind of complicated. It's kind of hard to explain in just a couple of sentences." And he said, "You're out." I mean, there's actually, that's what he did. So in an organization, I guess some people are looking for people who they can walk up to and say, "Okay, so what do you do here? Like, what is your job? Like, what is the main contribution that you make?" And they can say, "Oh, great. Well, I make sure that this happens. I make sure that this happens, and I make sure that this happens." And how do you do that? Oh, well, for number one, I gather all this data. I do that. Two, then I work with this team. Three, then I do it that. We do it together. We launch. We're ready to release the new product. Oh, great. Carry on. Do a good job. Okay. Give us an example of a job that you would ask that you know well, and you would ask a person, "Hey, what do you do?" And they could give you 3 or 4 specific things that they're accountable for and tell you how they do it that would cause you to go, you seem solid. Just think of one job and the accountabilities that would go with that, that would give people a really clear example of what a KPI is.
I think the easiest way to wrap your mind around KPIs, the easiest role to do that is probably sales roles. Those are what people, I think, a lot of times think about when they think about hard numbers, because it's just easy, right? Like the salespeople, their whole job is to drive revenue, right? Like that's what they're brought in to do. And so, KPI, something that they could be measured on is simply that, right? The amount of revenue that they bring in over whatever period, right? So it could be the amount of revenue over a month, quarter. I mean, you probably measure all of that. You might even get down to, depending on the sales cycle, you might measure things on a weekly basis. You could also measure things with salespeople, like the amount of calls that they're doing, right? And have certain metrics that they need to hit, cold calls that they need to make. So they're expected to hit whatever, 100 a week, 200 a week, 50 a week, whatever. The number doesn't matter. It's up to the organization, right? But like that is something you could track and say, are you meeting this or not? And the idea would be, if our belief at least is that if you make 50 cold calls a week, that will equate to this many, potential leads, which will be this number of dollars down the line, right? And so you can actually start building on these KPIs, and they can actually work together. You could look at, for a salesperson, the customer retention numbers, right? So are they actually getting repeat business from those customers? Because it's much cheaper for you to retain a customer than get a new customer. So you do want your salespeople to put some priority on retention of current customers. So those are, three metrics that you could measure with a salesperson. But again, I think the one that people probably, it'd be easier to think about is just the revenue. How much money are they bringing in? How much is that individual bringing into the organization? Because again, salespeople, that is what's important for them. And maybe we would touch on this, but I'll point it out now. I do think that when you are establishing KPIs, even for a salesperson, let's say like revenue, you do have to make sure that you understand the potential unintended consequences of those numbers, right? Because people are, if I know as a salesperson, my number, maybe I only have one, is to drive revenue. That's all I'm going to care about. That is what I do. That can cause problems where they oversell. I've seen this in professional services where salespeople will go in and promise things that make it really difficult to execute that contract. They might sell in a way that's not profitable for the organization. So revenue might not be the number. So just as an organization, you have to think about that. What are some of the unintended consequences? If they hit this metric, is it what we truly want, or are there some potential drawbacks to this number? And do I need to reevaluate that rather than a gross revenue number? Maybe it's a net revenue number. And that just depends on the overall goals, right? Which we could get into the weeds about that. But it's just something I think you need to think about, right? You put a number there, you do have to think about what are the unintended consequences if those numbers are achieved.
Yes, I think also customer service is it's an extremely important job. Anyone in a customer service role, a customer retention role, that's one of the most critical roles that you can have. And those are some really interesting metrics or KPI indicators around that, which tie in a whole um, uh, suite of particular uh, job skills and talents. Like a very, very important thing to measure is when a person is on the phone with a disgruntled or an unhappy or an angry customer, when that person gets off the call, are they angrier or are they feeling better? That's where the rubber meets the road in business today. So, and that's a good example. You could ask a person in customer retention, what is one of your key areas of accountability? When I get on the phone with an angry customer, most of the people that I get off the phone with should be feeling that they trust us again. And I'm really good at doing that.
So on that, so I think that's a good point. I think that's one of those that could be easy to think as an intangible metric, right? Like that's like, what does it mean to like they feel better? Um,
They say
I
yes. I answer yes. I feel that my question was answered, and
yeah,
I feel good about the company again. My answer is yes. I got on angry. Do you feel that you were treated well? Yes. Do you feel
yeah.
better? Yes.
So the importance there of like when you typically get those surveys at the end of customer service, right? So you're not measuring. It's not the fluffy, did they feel better? You're actually having some numbers that are the numerical representation of they feel better or worse, right? Like depending on
Right.
where they fall on that. Uh, so yeah, I agree with you, and that's why I wanted to call that out, because I think it's really easy to say, well, that's like a fluffy thing, right? They feel better, but you can actually measure that, and you can put numbers to that.
Um, yeah. One of the, I guess, truest statements in the world is, and this ties into key performance indicators and metrics too. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the expression, people may forget what you do and they may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. That's kind of intangible, and yet it's the most important thing. You know, this telephone company made me feel like, and I'm never going to talk to them again as long as I live. So, so yeah, these are pretty uh, important things to um, look at. And one of the things that I have noticed, and you can probably back me up on that, is the extreme importance of finding out whether people understand what it is that they're expected to do and what other people are expected to do too. Because most of the time when you go in, when we go in and ask them, they don't know. And so this might sound like a sales pitch, but fortunately, you and I, we have our own software platform called Engagement View, and we can interview 1,000 people by the end of the day and ask them, so what do you do, and what are people not doing that you think they should be doing better in order to drive revenue or cut costs? I mean, I'm pretty proud that we have that, so we can go in there and ask all of these questions in a very short time frame, and then help people uh, do something um, about it. But my point is that when we go in there and we ask people, what exactly is it that you do that impacts business drivers or cuts costs or drives revenue, and how does it work? Or the person sitting next to you that you're supposed to be supporting, what do they do, and how does it impact revenue or cut costs or something? They don't know. So haven't you seen that a lot? And don't you think that that's something that, as companies and organizations, we need to do a better job of?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we've talked about that, I think a couple of times, and I think it just gets into, goes back to the siloed behavior that we see within organizations, and people not understanding what each department does. And again, I think having things like accountabilities, having job descriptions, talking about these things in town halls, having KPIs, like all of this. And I think, well, let me back up. So, because I think the KPI conversations, we've been talking about that. I think one of the important aspects of KPIs that often is not done is explaining to people like why that number is important. Right? I think we leave out the why a lot of times. And so it's just like, I'm driving to this number. I'm driving to this number. That's all I care about. Not understanding how that plays into the bigger role. Like what is the organizational strategy, or what is our 5-year plan, and how do these numbers play into that? Like, why does it matter? You look at, so one of the things that I do is I help, I manage HR for some data centers, and, uptime is really important. So you could make that as a metric, right? 99% or greater uptime. Why does that matter? Now, you would hope that most engineers just understand that, right? The why uptime matters, but you could actually start talking about what impact it has anytime something is down, right? I mean, you're talking about everything. This right now is going on through a data center, right? We're having this conversation, it's going on through a data center. When somebody listens to this on Spotify or Apple or YouTube or whatever, it's through a data center. Your banking information is going through a data center, right? Like all of this stuff, everything that we do in life nowadays has data centers involved. And so uptime is really important when you start putting that context into place. And you hope, again, most people understand that, but you shouldn't have to just hope that. You should just have these conversations and have them understand why these numbers are important and how they drive the overall strategic vision of the organization and how they make the organization successful, which betters everybody in the long run.
Yeah, so I think it really lies at the core of institutional knowledge, collaboration, um, and productivity. So again, my experience is that when I've gone into a lot of places and said, okay, so we're sitting here in the room with all of the senior leadership team. Can anyone just kind of briefly explain for your colleagues the top four things that you are expected to do and how you have to do it a certain way and why you can't do it another way? The answers really just don't roll off the tip of the tongue, which they probably should, you know. And then when we ask, hey, does everybody know what everybody else in the room here does and why they have to do it the way that they do it and not another way? Oftentimes it's absolute dead silence. So and that in that particular scenario, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a guy with a doctorate in engagement and industrial organizational psychology like you to figure out you're probably operating on, um, two cylinders at that particular point. I mean, there's a lot of room for improvement and to get better mileage. So let's close this out this way. You are given the opportunity to walk into a room where the senior leadership team is there and you want to get them to help to do a better job of helping people understand what their KPIs are so that they can build more collaborative teams. What would you ask those people to do as an exercise among themselves that they could then roll out to their teams in the first month?
Yeah, so I will answer that. I do want to go back just 1 second to what you were saying as far as why do we do it this way or whatever, because it just made me think of something that I used to tell employees that I used to tell employees, like, I will quit my job if I ever say to you, if you ever come to me and say, why do we do something this way, and I just say it's just the way we've always done it, and that's where I stop. Like, I'll quit, because my follow up to that would be, because that might be the case, we might just have always done it that way, but I would tell them my promise to you is we do it this way because we've always done it that way, but what ideas do you have on to make it better, right? Like, because maybe there's a better way to do it. And I bring that up just because when you're talking about when you're going through that exercise and saying, well, why do we do it this way? Why do we do it that way? I think sometimes it is just nobody knows, right? It's like been passed down from generation to generation that we just do something a certain way and nobody's ever explained the why. And I've been in situations where, like, I don't even understand why an organization does something the way that it does, even organization that I was, running at the time. And so I think you have to be, humble enough to then ask, okay, but how should we do it? Like, what do you think? So anyways, I know that's a bit of a tangent, but it made me think about it. I thought it was relevant to the
No,
conversation.
that's extremely important. Now, since you brought that up, I will say I have seen in organizations which I definitely cannot name that people come to me and they are complaining and they're saying that a new person has just been hired that I have to report to now, and we've been doing, you know, building out this product according to very specific user defined expectations for 5 years because we're building software and we have to do it this way. And I'm being challenged, and no one has ever asked me, why are you doing it that way? And why do you have to do it that way and not another way? And I know exactly what the customer wants, and they don't seem to be interested in what the customer's specs are, nor have they asked me, but they're talking about changing things. So it happens all the time. It happens all the time, and it's just stupid and it's dangerous. So I'm going to, say yes to that. It is something that people do that should not be done. But if you want to stop that kind of thing, and you have this group of people, and you want to help them be better at explaining to one another what you do and why you have to do it, and learning that from them so that they can roll it out to other people downstream, what assignments would you give them for the first month? What would you get them doing?
So if we're starting a completely blank slate, nothing has been done. Um, what I would want to start with is, again, what's the overall mission of the company and what is the vision? So maybe just a high level, like what are some goals of the company? Like where do we want to be in the next, let's just start with 1 year. Then we can build from there. Eventually I'd like to get to a 5-10 year plan, but let's just start someplace if we have nothing, right? So what's the mission? And by mission, it's like, what's the purpose of the organization? Why does this company exist? Like at all? And the answer should not be, in my opinion, to make money. That's a byproduct of having a great company. That's not the sole purpose of an organization. I think you'll fail if all your job, the whole purpose is to make money. So what is really why does the company exist? And I think you can just like whiteboard stuff, just throw everything up there. I've done exercises before that I thought were really fun, where you take post-it notes and you write your ideas on those and then just stick them up on the wall. And then you review those and then you start to whittle them down into something, more coherent and start getting a direction. But that way you can get everybody's thoughts out there. If you can get the mission out there, and you can do this, with a couple working sessions. I've done it. It doesn't have to take forever. I think you do the same thing. So you have the mission now. Okay. So where do we, here, what's current state? Whatever that looks like, whatever you seem to care about based on what your mission is, where do we want to be in a year from now? Okay. We know that. And again, maybe we whiteboard some ideas there and we whittle it down and we figure that out. Now, again, let's talk about what are the important metrics to help us achieve that. And again, just whiteboard it. Like no bad idea. Just throw them all out there. You'll whittle them down to what are the important ones. I think it is important when you're talking about KPI. I don't need to measure everything, right? Like at least at the top level. I mean, maybe departments measure different things, but the biggest mistake I made when I first started setting up KPIs is I just had long spreadsheets of like all these things that we were tracking. If you're not actually able to do anything with those numbers, if there's nothing that you're going to implement, any plan, any strategy that's going to change those numbers, then they don't matter enough to have them as a KPI, right? Like let's just keep that are really important that we can have some meaningful impact on, that are also are going to ultimately help us achieve what that vision is a year from now, or again, once you establish further out. So I think the exercise over the month is you just do, some side work, some working sessions of whiteboarding or just throwing all of this out there, and then coming up with a roadmap, right, through those exercises. I found it to be super effective, and it's just really, really important that everybody feels like they have a voice in it and that there's no stupid ideas. Even if it seems far out there, ridiculous, whatever, throw it up there anyways. What's the worst case scenario? You just don't use it. But when you just have that free flow of information, that exchange of ideas, it helps you be really creative and maybe think of things that you wouldn't have normally thought about, right? And because now you have all these different perspectives with all these different leaders in there, especially from different departments. So they're all going to see things slightly differently, and it helps you get a more like well-rounded, it's a more well-rounded approach in my opinion.
Yeah, that's very powerful. I mean, I've heard you say a couple of really powerful things, and I think we can kind of close out on this and get back to talking about this more in detail on our next one. Um, I think a lot of times people present a lot of information to people on, say, a senior leadership team. and a finance person or CFO may walk in with a gigantic spreadsheet and just kind of sit there and sort of say, so I guess everyone can obviously understand what's going on here. A lot of people don't. They're not going to say it because it'll embarrass them. I don't have the slightest idea what that column represents, but they won't say anything. Okay. And then it's like, okay, well, that's kind of where we are. Does anyone have any thoughts? No. Okay, great. Well, everybody get back to work then. As you say, that doesn't do anybody any good. The hardest thing to do, which very few people do, is to get everyone in a room from a blank slate, okay, and just put the big gigantic 400 tab spreadsheet away and just say, in your role, what are the 4 highest priority items that you have to keep your eye on and improve right now? We're just going to ask for 4. And why do you do it this way? And why do you can't not do it another way? Well, supply chain might say we need to have more than 2 suppliers for this particular thing because we've been burned. We were seriously burned when we only had one, and then they weren't able to deliver. We almost had to shut down. So that's the last time that we'll do that. So we absolutely have to make sure that at any given time we have 3. And right now one of ours is kind of dicey, so I really need to get to work on that, like now. That's got it. I understand, but everyone should be able to say that. And this is the highest priority, hot button items for me, and that is why I have to work extremely tight with purchasing, and I have to work even more tightly with purchasing than I do now. Because quite frankly, purchasing, we're not really getting along, are we? Not seeing eye to eye, right? We need to work on that. Bring it into the room. Yeah, we're not. Okay, why don't we just discuss this as a group? You know, how can we work together better here? Okay, well, I kind of need you to give me this, and I kind of need you to give me that. Okay, great. Well, now we solved it. Okay, moving right along, go to the next department. What are the most important high priority items? Not the 1,000, but the ones that can kill you if you don't do it right. And what are the other teams that you have to work with? And you'll get killed if they don't do this right. What are they? Understand it, write it down, map it out if it takes 2 days, and then say, hey, is everyone got it now? Does everyone understand how we're going to work together better on these hot items for the next month? Yes. Are you glad we had this chat? Yes. Did you understand it before we had this chat? No. So I guess what I'm saying is you're right. I'm agreeing with you 100%. And I think this is a good trail for us to go down. Having these conversations and understanding what a KPI is and why they're so daggone important. So, do you want to come back next time and drill down even more specifically in how we take a look as organizations at KPIs and get people across the entire organization to understand what they mean? Do you want to do that next time?
Yeah, I think that's good. I also think that, as you were talking, one of the things that we can maybe go into some details, I think there's some ways, there's some systems out there of how to run some regular meetings, some weekly meetings that will accomplish what you just laid out really well. And we can kind of go into some more detail about that. I think that there's some tips there on how to run a meeting that will do exactly what you just mentioned on a regular basis.
Awesome. Systems people perk up. Next time we come back, we're going to talk to you about systems that you can put in place for weekly meetings that will help you put it into 6th gear. So, Dr. Brian Peters, as always, awesome spending this time with you. I know you're getting ready to try and enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you for spending this time. Really enjoyed it, and we will look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was fun.